Okay, so let's take a really deep dive today into a book that I think has fundamentally shifted how countless people think about change, improvement, and, well, even identity. James Clear's Atomic Habits.
Right.
You
Yeah.
probably know James Clear from his writing online. He started sharing his ideas, his experiments on his website, jamesclear.com, way back in November 2012.
That's right. And it really kicked off with a very simple habit of his own, actually, just writing and publishing articles twice a week.
Yeah.
And he wasn't, he wasn't presenting himself as some kind of established guru right from the start. He was really open about experimenting with these ideas, like alongside his readers.
Right, learning in public, sort of.
Exactly. And that small, consistent habit of just sharing what he was learning, it grew into something, well, pretty remarkable.
It really did compound, didn't that core idea in action right there?
Totally. He went from, about 1,000 email subscribers in just a few months to over 30,000 by the end of 2013. Then 100,000 in 2014. And by the time he was actually finishing up the book, Atomic Habits, in 2018, he was nearly at 500,000 subscribers.
Oh, and now millions of visitors a month to the site.
Yeah, millions. And he's built the Habits Academy, which is, a leading training platform all based on these principles.
And that whole growth story, it's kind of a perfect illustration of the very ideas he talks about in the book.
It really is. And his personal journey is woven all through the book, too. He talks about his own experience recovering from a really severe injury.
The baseball accident, right.
Yeah, exactly. Going from being in a medically induced coma to eventually becoming an academic All-American athlete, it's an incredible story. He had to rebuild everything piece by piece, starting really, really small.
So at its heart, Atomic Habits is about building better habits by focusing on these tiny, tiny changes. Changes that, when you repeat them consistently over time, they don't just add up.
They compound.
They compound
Yeah.
into these remarkable results. It's not like some overnight magic transformation.
No, definitely not. It's much more of a gradual, incremental evolution. You get there through, a series of small wins, tiny breakthroughs, day after day.
Right. The central idea being that the quality of our lives often reflects the quality of our habits.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. If you keep doing the same things, the same habits, you're pretty much guaranteed to get the same results, right?
Makes sense.
But if you can actually implement better habits, well, suddenly that opens the door to almost anything being possible. The book really provides a practical system for getting that kind of improvement going.
So who is this book really for then? Is it just for athletes or, people recovering from major setbacks like he did?
Oh, not at all. James Clear is really clear about this, pardon the pun. The system is for anyone looking for a step-by-step approach to getting better, to improving themselves.
It's a pretty broad applicability.
Totally. It doesn't matter what specific area you're trying to change. Maybe it's your health, maybe it's your finances, productivity at work, building stronger relationships, or, heck, all of them combined.
If human behavior is involved.
Then this book is a guide. Yeah. As long as human behavior is part of the equation, the principles in here offer a really powerful roadmap.
And why do you think it resonates so deeply with so many people?
Well, I think a big part is that James Clear really lives it. He didn't just write about it, he embodies it. There's that great line in the book where he says something like, to write a great book, you must first become the book.
I like that.
And he really did. He used these ideas himself to bounce back from that injury, to excel as an athlete, but also to become a successful writer, to build a thriving business, and just, navigate the complexities of becoming a responsible adult.
So it's really about fulfilling your potential, whatever that might mean for you personally.
Exactly. He used small, consistent habits to fulfill his own potential, and the system he lays out is really designed to empower you, the reader, to build the habits that will help you fulfill yours. It gives you the tools, the framework to shape your own path.
Okay, let's dive into that first big core idea he presents. Why tiny changes make a big difference.
This is where we really unpack the surprising power packed inside these atomic habits.
Right, so think about that word, atomic. An atom, it's the fundamental unit of a molecule, right? The basic building block of everything around us.
Okay.
So James Clear uses atomic habit to mean a tiny habit, a really small fundamental routine or practice that acts as a building block for achieving larger, much more significant outcomes. These atomic habits are the little habits, but they're part of a bigger system, just like atoms build molecules.
And the real power isn't just in the habit itself, it's how they grow and interact over time, that compounding effect again.
Precisely. It's the principle of compounding, but applied to self-improvement instead of just money. Right, we hear about compound interest in finance all the time.
Yeah.
Small amounts growing exponentially.
Exactly. Habits work the same way. The dividends just aren't in dollars, they're in things like better health, more knowledge, increased productivity, stronger relationships. And the math behind it is, well, it's pretty stark, actually. If you get just 1% better every single day for a year.
Just 1%. Seems tiny.
It does seem tiny, but by the end of that year, you won't just be 365% better. You'll be nearly 38 times better than when you started.
38 times.
Yeah.
Seriously, from just 1% a day.
Yep. The calculation is 1.01 raised to the power of 365. That equals 37.78. That tiny 1% growth compounded daily, it leads to exponential improvement.
Wow.
And the flip side is just as dramatic. If you get just 1% worse each day, maybe you slip into a slightly worse habit that's 0.99 to the power of 365, you decline almost down to zero. You end up at about 0.03 of where you started.
That difference is absolutely staggering. Especially when you think, like you said, 1% feels almost invisible day to day. You don't feel 1% better after, doing one extra push-up or reading one page.
And that's precisely why it's so hard for us to really appreciate this principle in the moment, in real time. We tend to massively overestimate the importance of one single defining moment, that huge success story, that one big action somebody took.
The overnight success myth.
Exactly. And we completely underestimate the cumulative power, the value of making these small incremental improvements day after day after day. Achieving massive success most of the time doesn't actually require massive action right at the start. It requires consistent, small actions that compound.
The example that really drives this home in the book, I think, is the story of the British cycling team. That turnaround was incredible.
Oh, it's a perfect illustration. It's all about the aggregation of marginal gains. For almost a century, British cycling was, well, pretty mediocre, honestly.
Yeah, not exactly world beaters.
Not at all. They'd won only one Olympic gold medal in something like 76 years, and they'd never won the Tour de France, which is, the biggest race in cycling. Then, in 2003, they hired Dave Brailsford as their performance director.
And his whole strategy was basically improve everything by 1%.
Exactly. It sounds simple, but it was incredibly thorough. It wasn't about finding one magic bullet, one big breakthrough. It was about relentlessly searching for tiny margins of improvement in everything related to riding a bike.
Everything. Like what?
Like everything. They analyzed the rider's diet, obviously. What kind of pillow gives the best night's sleep for recovery? What's the most effective way to wash your hands to avoid illness? What's the optimal training program? The aerodynamics of the bike seat, the best grip on the tires.
Okay, that makes sense. But they went further, right?
Oh, yeah. They looked at things that seemed almost completely unrelated, like they tested different massage gels to see which aided muscle recovery fastest. They hired a surgeon to teach the riders the best way to wash their hands to reduce the chance of catching a cold. They even painted the inside of the team truck white.
Okay, wait. Painting the inside of the truck white. How does that help a cyclist go faster? That sounds crazy.
It does sound a bit out there, but it was one of those granular 1% ideas. The white floor meant the mechanics could spot even tiny specks of dust or debris much more easily.
Ah, so the bikes were maintained absolutely perfectly. No microscopic grit messing with performance.
Precisely. Every single detail, no matter how small it seemed, was put under the microscope, looking for that potential 1% gain.
And the results? What happened after all this meticulous 1%ing?
The results were just astonishing, almost unbelievable given their history. Within just 5 years, at the 2008 Beijing Olympics, British cyclists won a staggering 57% of the gold medals available in road and track cycling.
57%. From basically nothing.
Pretty much. And then 4 years later, at the London Olympics in 2012, they did again. Huge success. Over the decade, from 2007 to 2017, they won 178 world championships, 66 Olympic or Paralympic gold medals, and British riders won the Tour de France 5 times.
Incredible. They went from average to completely dominating the sport globally.
For a whole decade. And the key is that dominance didn't come from one superstar rider suddenly appearing or one revolutionary new bike design.
It was the accumulation.
It was the cumulative effect of all those tiny improvements adding up, compounding together. Better grip tape here, a more comfortable seat there, slightly better sleep, perfect bike maintenance. Individually, maybe insignificant. Combined, transformative. That's the power of atomic habits.
But you touched on something crucial earlier. Why is this so hard for us, in our everyday lives? If 1% a day leads to 38 times improvement, why aren't we all just doing it constantly?
Well, it comes back to that delay, right? The results of these tiny changes, they're often delayed. The progress you make in the first few days or weeks, it's often too small to really see or feel.
Right. You don't get that immediate hit of satisfaction.
Exactly. Imagine starting a habit of reading for just 10 minutes a day. After a week, maybe you finish a chapter, maybe two. It doesn't feel like you're dramatically changing your knowledge base or becoming some radically different person right away.
The big benefits are way down the road.
Yeah, the positive results are spread out over time. We are just fundamentally wired to respond more strongly to immediate rewards. Our ancient brains evolved prioritizing immediate gratification, find food now, escape danger now.
But the rewards for good habits, health, knowledge, financial security, they usually take months or years to really show up.
Precisely. The most powerful outcomes of any compounding process, whether it's investing money or building habits, they lie in the future.
Yeah.
That requires patience. It requires trusting the process, even when you aren't seeing big results day to day.
It's only looking back that you see the impact.
Right. Only when you look back after months or years does the enormous impact become really clear. Those small wins, or even those minor setbacks that seemed totally unimportant at the time, they've accumulated into something much, much bigger.
Okay, this next idea from Atomic Habits is really interesting and maybe a bit counterintuitive at first. We're always told, set goals, big ambitious goals. But James Clear suggests we should maybe forget about goals and focus on systems instead.
Yeah, this is a really critical distinction he makes. And it's not that goals are bad, right? Goals are valuable, absolutely. They serve a purpose.
To give you direction.
Exactly. They set the direction. They point you towards where you want to go, like a compass pointing north. But, he argues, it's the systems that are truly essential for actually making progress in that direction. A system is the process, the collection of habits that leads to the results.
So if the goal is, say, run a marathon.
The system is your training schedule, how consistently you follow it, your nutrition plan, your sleep habits, your stretching routine, all the repeatable actions that get you ready.
Okay. And he points out some problems with focusing too much just on the goal itself, right, to the point where you ignore the system.
Yeah, he identifies several potential pitfalls. The first one is that winners and losers often share the exact same goals.
Right. Every team wants to win the championship.
Exactly. Every applicant wants the job. Every startup wants to be successful. Just having the goal of winning doesn't distinguish the people who actually succeed from those who don't. Success isn't just about wanting the goal, it's about the system they use, the quality of their training, their strategy, their daily discipline, their habits.
It highlights survivorship bias, doesn't it? We see the winners and assume the goal was the key.
Precisely. We ignore all the others who had the same goal but lacked an effective system. So the goal sets the target, but the system is what gets you there.
Okay. What's the second problem with over-focusing on goals?
Goal achievement is often temporary. Think about cleaning your messy room. If your goal is just have a clean room for the party tonight.
You clean it for the party. Goal achieved.
Right. But once the party's over, if your underlying system for maintaining cleanliness hasn't changed, if you're fundamentally still someone with messy habits, what happens?
It probably gets messy again pretty quickly.
Exactly. Because the motivation tied to that specific temporary goal has vanished. The system, or lack thereof, takes over again.
So the goal was just an event, not a lasting change in process or identity.
Right. Which ties into the third issue. Goals can restrict your happiness. It's easy to fall into that I'll be happy when trap. I'll be happy when I lose 20 pounds, or I'll be happy when I get that promotion.
You're deferring happiness until you hit the milestone.
Exactly. But with a system-focused approach, you can actually find satisfaction and fulfillment in the process itself. You can feel good, feel successful, as long as you are executing your system, regardless of whether you've hit some arbitrary future target yet.
It shifts the focus from that future outcome to the present action, the process.
Mm-hmm. And the final point is that goals are often about winning a single game, like that championship match. Systems are about continuing to play the game indefinitely. They represent this ongoing cycle of continuous improvement, of endless refinement. So true long-term thinking, in this view, is actually goalless thinking.
Goalless thinking. That sounds radical.
It means being deeply committed to the process, to the system, day in and day out, not just being fixated on the eventual prize.
This really reframes how we should think about struggling with habits. If you're finding it hard to change, it's not necessarily a personal failing.
That's such a crucial takeaway. The problem is usually not you. Bad habits keep repeating, and good ones fail to stick. Not because you lack willpower or because you're inherently lazy, but often because you're working with the wrong system for change, or maybe you don't even have a system.
Your environment or your process is actually enabling the old behavior.
Right. So the big message here is really powerful. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. If you want different results, you have to stop focusing only on the results and start building different, better systems.
Okay, so if we're focusing on systems on consistency,
Yep.
what's the guiding principle? How do we know which systems to build? This brings us to the third core lesson, which I find really compelling: identity-based habits. Focusing on who you want to become.
Yes, this is arguably one of the most profound insights in the book. It really elevates the discussion beyond just the what you do, your habits, and the how you do it, your system. It focuses squarely on the who you are becoming through those actions.
So habits are the path to changing your identity.
That's exactly what James Clear argues. He says the most practical and effective way to change who you are, to change your self-image, is to change what you consistently do. Your actions provide the evidence for your beliefs about yourself.
So it's not just about achieving the outcome of, say, losing weight.
It's about becoming a healthy person.
Or not just writing a book.
But becoming a writer. Exactly. Your identity emerges out of your habits. Every action you take is like a vote for the type of person you wish to become.
There's that really memorable story in the book about the guy who bit his fingernails. Clark, was it?
Yeah, Clark. He'd bitten his nails his entire life, tried quitting loads of time, sheer willpower, maybe succeeded for a few weeks here and there, but the habit always came back.
Until he got a manicure. That seems almost too simple. How did that work?
Well, it wasn't the manicure itself, like the physical act, that solved it. It was the feeling it created afterward. When the manicurist finished, Clark looked down and saw his nails looking clean, neat, healthy, maybe for the first time he could remember.
Okay.
And the manicurist even complimented them, saying something like, "Wow, your nails look really nice, despite the biting." And for the first time, Clark felt genuinely proud of his fingernails.
Ah, pride. That was the key.
That seems to be it. Because that feeling of pride started to subtly shift his self-image. He began to see himself, even just a little, as someone who has nice nails, someone who takes care of them.
And biting them suddenly felt wrong.
It felt completely inconsistent with this new emerging identity. It clashed with his self-image as someone with clean, healthy nails he was proud of. So he just stopped. He never chewed them again because it was fundamentally out of alignment with who he was becoming.
That's a fantastic illustration of identity conflict. Even if a good habit makes perfect rational sense, if it clashes with how you see yourself deep down,
You'll struggle. You'll sabotage yourself, absolutely. If you truly believe I'm not a morning person, dragging yourself out of bed early for a workout will feel like a constant battle against your fundamental nature. If your core identity is, I'm just bad with money, then sticking to a budget will feel unnatural, forced, and probably won't last.
So your identity can be the biggest roadblock to change, even more than lack of motivation or willpower.
It often is. Which means that becoming your best self isn't just about adding new habits. It's also about continuously reviewing, editing, and sometimes letting go of the limiting beliefs you hold about yourself.
You have to be willing to update your identity.
Yes, and actively work to expand it. Progress often requires unlearning those old self-images, like, I'm not the kind of person who, or that's just not me. And every action you take, every habit you perform is essentially, as Clear puts it, a vote cast for the type of person you want to be.
I love that voting analogy. It really sticks.
It does, doesn't it? Each time you sit down and write for 15 minutes, boom, that's a vote for I am a writer. Each time you choose water over soda, vote for I am a healthy person. Each time you start your workout, even if you only do 5 minutes, that's a vote for I am an active person.
And one vote might not seem like much.
Exactly. One vote doesn't change the election, right?
Yep.
But over time, as you cast more and more votes through consistent action, the evidence accumulates. It builds a compelling case. It reinforces the story you tell yourself about who you are.
And that accumulation of evidence, that's what builds self-trust and belief in yourself.
Precisely. As you rack up those votes, you start to genuinely trust yourself more. You see tangible proof that you can be the kind of person who does these things consistently. So your habits don't just get you external results. They fundamentally shape your internal beliefs about yourself.
So habits shape identity, and identity shapes habits. It's a loop.
It's a continuous feedback loop. Which is why the ultimate focus should always be on becoming the type of person you want to become. Let that desired identity be your North Star, guiding the habits and systems you choose to build. Know who you want to be first.
Okay, this is great. We understand the power of tiny changes, the importance of systems over just goals, and the guiding principle of identity. Now, let's get into the real mechanics. How do habits actually work in our brains? And how can we use that knowledge to build better ones? This is where we break down the 4 simple steps, the habit loop.
Right, this framework is really the engine of the book, and it's based on fundamental principles of psychology that have been understood, really, for over a century. It goes back to some fascinating early experiments, like those by the psychologist Edward Thorndike back in 1898.
Thorndike.
Yeah,
Wasn't he the one with the cats and puzzle boxes?
that's the one. Thorndike would put cats inside these specially designed puzzle boxes, and the boxes were rigged so that if the cat performed a specific action, maybe pulling a string or pressing a lever or stepping on a little platform, the door would swing open and they could escape to get some food waiting outside.
Okay, so escape and food were the rewards. What do the cats do?
Well, initially they'd just do random cat things, right? Scratching at the bars, biting, meowing, pacing around anxiously. But eventually, usually by complete accident, one of their random actions would trigger the escape mechanism. Whoosh! The door opens, they get the food.
And then what happened when they were put back in?
Thorndike observed that on subsequent trials, the cats became much quicker at performing the successful action. The behaviors that were followed by satisfying consequences, like getting food and escaping confinement, were repeated more often and became faster. This became known as the law of effect.
Behaviors plus satisfying consequence. Repetition.
That's the core idea, yeah. Our brains are constantly doing a similar thing. Your brain's fundamental job is to help you survive and thrive, basically by minimizing effort and maximizing reward. It's always analyzing situations, trying to find the most efficient path to satisfaction.
Like the cats figuring out the puzzle box.
Exactly. When you encounter a new situation, your brain often goes into a kind of trial and error mode until it stumbles upon a solution that provides some kind of reward. And over time, with repetition, the brain automates this whole process. It learns to predict that certain cues signal an opportunity for a reward, which triggers a craving, leading to a response that delivers that reward. This whole sequence becomes automatic. That's a habit.
And this automatic process always happens in 4 predictable stages, in the same order every time. Cue, craving, response, and reward.
That's the habit loop, the 4 stages. Let's break each one down. Stage 1 is the cue.
To trigger.
Exactly. It's the trigger. It's some piece of information in your environment, internal or external, that predicts a reward is available. It's the signal that tells your brain, hey, pay attention. Opportunity for satisfaction here.
Like seeing a notification pop up on your phone, or smelling fresh coffee.
Perfect examples. Those are external cues. Or it can be internal, like feeling bored or stressed or just waking up in the morning. And here's the thing. As habits become more automatic, we often stop consciously noticing the cues that trigger them. They become invisible.
Like automatically reaching for your phone the second it buzzes, without even thinking.
Precisely. Your brain becomes this amazing prediction machine. It's constantly scanning your environment, unconsciously looking for cues that predict something important: food, danger, social connection, relief. It learns to associate specific cues with specific outcomes through repetition.
Which is super useful sometimes, right? Like an experienced doctor spotting subtle symptoms.
Incredibly useful. Experienced paramedics, expert radiologists, even skilled mechanics or hairdressers, they've encountered certain cues so many times that the prediction and response happen almost instantly without conscious thought. They've wired that association deep into their brains.
But that same automatic prediction is what makes bad habits so easy to fall into mindlessly.
That's the downside. The cue appears, the automatic sequence fires off, and bam, you're already doing the thing before you even consciously registered the trigger.
Okay, so the cue trigger stage 2, the craving.
Right. The craving is the motivational force. It's the engine behind every habit. And crucially, you don't actually crave the habit itself. You crave the change in state or the feeling that the habit provides.
Explain that a bit more.
Okay, so you don't crave the act of smoking a cigarette. You crave the feeling of stress relief it temporarily provides. You don't crave scrolling Instagram. You crave the potential feeling of being entertained or connected or escaping boredom or reducing uncertainty. Every craving we have is ultimately linked to some deeper underlying human motive: the desire for comfort, approval, status, connection, stress reduction, and so on.
So the craving is the desire for the reward. The motivation to act. It's the why.
Exactly. It's the anticipation of that reward that makes the behavior seem attractive. No craving, no motivation, no action follows the cue.
Which leads us to stage 3, the response.
This is pretty straightforward. The response is the actual performance of the habit itself. It's the action you take or the thought pattern you engage in. Picking up the phone, biting your nails, drinking the coffee, going for the run, thinking a negative thought, that's the response.
And finally, stage 4, the reward.
The reward is the end goal of the habit loop. It's the outcome that satisfies the craving and completes the cycle. And the reward serves 2 critical purposes. First, it satisfies the craving, at least for a little while. Second, and maybe more importantly for habit formation, it teaches your brain which actions are worth remembering and repeating in the future.
It's the feedback mechanism.
Exactly. Pleasure and disappointment are feedback. They constantly update your brain's predictions about what works. If the response doesn't deliver a satisfying reward that actually alleviates the craving, your brain has no reason to prioritize or repeat that sequence next time the cue appears. The habit cycle won't get reinforced. It won't stick.
So for a habit to form and stick, all 4 stages need to be working together effectively.
Absolutely. Remove the cue, the habit never even starts. Eliminate the craving, you lack the motivation to act. Make the response too difficult or effortful, you won't be able to do it consistently. And if the reward isn't satisfying, you won't have any reason to repeat it. It falls apart.
So the framework for change becomes clear. To build a good habit, you need to make the cue obvious, the craving attractive, the response easy, and the reward satisfying.
And to break a bad habit, you just invert those principles. Make the cue invisible, the craving unattractive, the response difficult, and the reward unsatisfying. That's the core framework.
Okay, let's run through a couple of quick examples using those 4 stages, just to really nail down the habit loop for everyone listening.
Sure. Okay, you're sitting at your desk, maybe working, and you start to feel a bit restless or bored. That feeling, that's the internal cue.
Right.
Your brain registers this and triggers a craving maybe for stimulation or distraction or just a change of scenery. You want to feel different.
Okay.
Your response is to pull out your phone and open up, say, a news app or social media.
The action.
Yep. And the reward is that little hit of novelty, maybe some interesting information or a funny video that temporarily satisfies the craving and alleviates the boredom. Your brain now strengthens the link. Boredom cue plus check phone response. Relief reward.
Makes sense. Let's do one more, maybe a food one.
Okay. You walk into your kitchen in the evening. Just walking in is the environmental cue. Your brain might automatically trigger a craving for a snack, maybe just because you often snack when you're in the kitchen, or maybe you're feeling a bit peckish.
Learned association?
Could be. Your response is to open the cupboard, see a bag of cookies, and grab one. The reward is the immediate pleasure of the sugary, tasty cookie, which satisfies the craving. Boom. The kitchen cue becomes even more strongly linked to the cookie response because the reward was immediate and satisfying.
Cue, craving, response, reward.
Got it.
It's the underlying pattern for all our automatic behaviors.
Exactly. Good ones and bad ones. And once you really understand this loop, you can start to intentionally intervene at each stage to design the habits you want.
Which starts with that first step, the cue. So the first law of behavior change is make it obvious.
Right. Because so many of our habits are automatic, and the cues that trigger them often become invisible to us over time. The very first step in changing any habit is simply increasing your awareness. What actually sets off your current behaviors? You need to see the cues clearly first.
This reminds me of that system you mentioned earlier, the pointing and calling thing from Japan.
Oh yeah, that's a brilliant real-world example. Japanese train operators use it to drastically reduce errors. When they perform critical safety checks, like confirming a signal is green or that the doors are properly closed, they don't just glance at it.
They physically point.
They physically point directly at the signal or the door indicator, and they verbally call out the status. Signal is green, or platform clear, doors closing.
It sounds almost, I don't know, performative, a bit over the top.
It might seem that way, but the results are incredible. Studies showed it reduces errors by up to 85% and cuts accidents by 30%. Even the New York City subway saw a big drop in incidents when they implemented a version of it.
Why does it work so well?
Because it forces you to shift from an unconscious automatic mode into a conscious state of awareness. You're deliberately engaging multiple senses, sight, speech, hearing, to confirm the action. You can't do it mindlessly.
So how do we apply that kind of conscious awareness to our own personal habits? We can't go around pointing and shouting all day.
Haha, probably not. James Clear suggests a simple exercise called the Habits Scorecard. This is basically your personal point-and-call system for your daily routines.
Okay, how does that work?
For a day or two, just make a list of everything you do habitually. From the moment you wake up, check phone, brush teeth, make coffee all the way through your day until you go to bed. Just list them out. No judgment yet.
Just observe and record.
Exactly. Then go back through that list and mark each habit. Put a plus A next to it if it's generally a good habit, one that helps you become the person you want to be. A vote for your desired identity. Put a if it's generally a bad habit, hindering your progress. A vote against that identity. And put an A if it's basically neutral.
And the point isn't to beat yourself up about the A habits.
Not at all. The goal is purely observation and awareness. You might actually be surprised by how many automatic habits you perform every single day that you weren't even consciously thinking about. You also start to realize that even the bad habits are serving some kind of purpose in the moment.
They're solving some problem, even if badly.
Right. Smoking might be reducing stress right now. Eating junk food might be providing comfort right now. They are effective in a sense, even if detrimental long term. The core question you're asking yourself, linking back to identity, is, does this behavior help me become the type of person I wish to be? Just gaining that awareness of your existing cues and habits is the absolutely essential first step.
Okay, so once you have that awareness, how do you use this make it obvious law to actually start building new good habits?
There are two really powerful strategies he outlines. The first one is using implementation intentions.
That sounds fancy. What is it?
It's actually very simple. It just means making a specific, concrete plan for exactly when and where you will perform your new habit. It's not enough to have a vague intention like, I want to start meditating more.
You need specifics.
You need specifics.
Yeah.
The formula is, I will behavior at time and location.
So I will meditate for 10 minutes at 7 a.m. in my living room chair.
Perfect. Research consistently shows that people who make clear, specific plans like this are significantly more likely to actually follow through compared to those who just have vague goals. It basically gives your brain a clear instruction and removes the friction of having to decide when and where in the moment. It works for all sorts of things: exercise, studying, taking medication, even voting.
It turns intention into a plan. What's the second strategy?
Habit stacking. This is another brilliant one. It involves taking the new habit you want to build and literally stacking it onto an existing habit that you already perform consistently every single day without fail.
So you use the old habit as the trigger for the new one.
Exactly. The formula here is, after current habit, I will new habit.
Okay, give me an example.
After I pour my morning cup of coffee, I will do 2 minutes of stretching. Or after I take off my work shoes when I get home, I will immediately change into my workout clothes. Your current established habit acts as the automatic cue for the new desired behavior.
It makes the cue super obvious because it's already built into your routine.
Precisely. It leverages the momentum you already have. You can even chain several habits together using this method, creating powerful routines where one habit flows smoothly into the next.
Like creating a positive domino effect in your day.
That's a great way to put it. It taps into existing pathways in your brain. It's kind of like the Diderot effect in psychology, where getting one new fancy item makes you want other things to match it. Habit stacking uses that same principle. One behavior triggers the next, but in a positive way.
Beyond these specific planning techniques, how does our actual physical environment play into making cues obvious?
Environment design is massive, absolutely critical. James Clear calls the environment the invisible hand that shapes human behavior. Our actions aren't just a product of our personality or willpower alone. They're heavily influenced by the context we're in. Remember the formula. Behavior is a function of the person in their environment, BFPE.
You act differently in a library than at a party.
Exactly. Even though you're the same person, our habits become deeply associated with the specific contexts and environments where we perform them.
So we need to be architects of our own environment. Design it to support the habits we want.
That's the key takeaway. Become the architect. Make the cues for your good habits as obvious and visible as possible within your environment. Remember that Dutch energy study from the 70s?
The one with the electricity meters.
Yeah. People whose electricity meters were installed in their main hallway used significantly less energy than people whose meters were hidden away in the basement. The only difference was visibility. When the cue for energy consumption, the meter, was obvious, people were more mindful. When it was hidden, out of sight, out of mind.
So if you want to practice guitar more, don't keep it in the case in the closet.
Exactly. Put it on a stand right in the middle of your living room where you can't miss it. If you want to drink more water, keep filled water bottles visible on your desk, on the counter, everywhere. If you want to remember your vitamins, put the bottle right next to your toothbrush or coffee maker. Make the cue for the desired behavior unavoidable.
Make the best choice, the easiest and most obvious choice.
You got it. Sprinkle triggers for your good habits throughout your surroundings. Think about how many cues a smoker might have stress. Finishing a meal, seeing others smoke, driving. You can intentionally design your environment to be just as saturated with cues for good habits.
And the context itself becomes a cue over time.
Absolutely. If you only use your bedroom for sleeping, just walking into your bedroom becomes a powerful cue for sleepiness. If you also watch TV, work, and eat in bed, the cue gets diluted and much less effective. That's why sleep experts often advise insomniacs to get out of bed if they can't sleep, to strengthen that specific bed-issue-sleep association.
Is this also why it often feels easier to change habits when you go on vacation or move to a new city?
That's a huge part of it. A completely new environment breaks all those old, ingrained cue response loops. You're simply not bombarded by the same triggers that used to set off your old automatic behaviors. The famous studies of Vietnam veterans who had high rates of heroin addiction during the war.
But most quit easily when they came home.
Exactly, because they returned to an environment completely devoid of the powerful wartime cues they associated with drug use. It highlights how context-dependent habits can be.
So trying to just resist temptation through sheer willpower day after day in an environment full of bad cues, it's not the best strategy.
It's an incredibly difficult uphill battle. Willpower is a finite resource. While you might resist sometimes, you are fundamentally influenced by your environment. It is extremely hard to stick to positive habits consistently if your surroundings are constantly triggering cues for negative ones. The most reliable way to eliminate a bad habit isn't willpower. It's reducing your exposure to the cue that triggers it in the first place.
Which brings us perfectly to the inversion of the first law. Make it invisible.
Exactly. For the habits you want to break, you need to actively work to reduce your exposure to their triggers. Make the cues invisible. Hide the junk food way in the back of a high cupboard you rarely open. Unsubscribe from those tempting marketing emails. Delete the social media apps off your phone's home screen, maybe even off the phone entirely.
Like James Clear's strategy of having his assistant reset his passwords.
Yeah, that's a great example of adding friction by making the cue, easy login, less visible or accessible. Even a little bit of friction, making the cue harder to encounter, can make a surprisingly big difference in breaking that automatic chain. Make the cues for bad habits invisible.
All right, that covers the cue. Let's move to the second stage of the habit loop, the craving. The second law of behavior change is make it attractive.
Right. This law is all about engineering your habits so that the good ones feel appealing, desirable, maybe even fun, and finding ways to make the bad habits seem less appealing. And the key mechanism here is dopamine.
The pleasure chemical.
Well, it's often called that, but it's more accurate to think of it as the anticipation or desire chemical. Dopamine is released not just when we experience pleasure, but significantly when we anticipate a reward. It's that feeling of wanting, of desire, of craving that floods the brain with dopamine. And it's this anticipation that makes a potential behavior feel attractive and motivates us to act.
So it's the prediction of satisfaction that really drives us forward.
Yes. Often the dopamine spike is actually higher before we get the reward while we're anticipating it than when we actually receive it. This is obviously true for addictive things like drugs or gambling or junk food, but it's also the mechanism behind our cravings for basic survival needs that are now kind of exploited in the modern world: food, water, sex, social interaction. Our brain releases dopamine when it anticipates getting these things, making the behaviors that lead to them feel attractive.
And you mentioned earlier, the modern world has gotten incredibly good at hacking this system.
Oh, absolutely. Our brains evolved over millennia to crave things like salt, sugar, and fat because they were scarce and vital for survival back on the savannah. Now, the food industry employs armies of scientists to engineer processed foods to hit our bliss point, that perfect hyper-palatable combination of salt, sugar, and fat that maximizes craving and makes the food almost addictive.
They're basically hijacking our ancient brain chemistry.
Pretty much. We're constantly surrounded by these supernormal stimuli designed to make us crave things intensely. We're pushing our own evolutionary buttons, often to our detriment.
So given that we're up against these powerful engineered cravings, how on earth do we make good habits which often don't have such immediate, intense payoffs feel attractive enough to compete?
Well, one of the most powerful forces shaping what we find attractive is our social environment. We are fundamentally tribal creatures. We have this deep-seated primal desire to fit in, to belong, to be accepted by our group.
So we adopt the habits of the people around us.
We absolutely do. We tend to adopt the habits, the behaviors, the norms of the groups we identify with and belong to. If a certain behavior is praised or accepted or just seen as normal by our peers or family or the culture we value, it becomes inherently more attractive to us. We want to do what they do.
Like that story of the Polgar sisters, the chess prodigies.
That's a fantastic example. Their father, Laszlo Polgar, had this theory that genius wasn't born. It was made through focused early training. So he raised his 3 daughters, Susan, Sophia, and Judith, to be chess champions. They spent thousands upon thousands of hours practicing chess from a very young age.
But was it because they just naturally loved chess that much?
Not necessarily more than any other kid might initially, but chess was the absolute central focus of their unique family culture. Their parents' constant praise and reinforcement, the intense focus on chess above all else, and eventually the status and recognition they gained as they became incredibly good. All of that made the rigorous, demanding habit of chess practice intensely attractive within their specific world. It was the norm. It was rewarded.
So we tend to imitate the habits of 3 groups: the close, the many, and the powerful.
That's Jim Scler's breakdown, yes. We imitate the close, our family, friends, colleagues. We imitate the many. We conform to the social norms of the groups we belong to, doing what everyone else does. And we imitate the powerful. We copy the habits of people who have status and success because we believe those habits might lead to similar results for us.
Social norms are like invisible rules guiding our behavior.
They really are. As the philosopher Montaigne said, the laws of conscience, which we pretend to be derived from nature, proceed from custom. We'd often rather be wrong with the crowd than be right all by ourselves because that feeling of belonging, approval, respect, praise, those are incredibly attractive rewards. Therefore, one of the most effective ways to make a desired habit attractive is to join a culture or group where that behavior is already the normal, expected behavior.
Surround yourself with people who are already doing what you want to do.
Exactly, especially if you already share some other values or interests with that group. Think of communities like nerd fitness people connect over shared nerdy interests, and within that community, exercise and healthy eating become the normal, supported behavior. Your social environment matters hugely.
Okay, what are some other specific, practical techniques for making good habits more attractive?
A really effective one is called temptation bundling. This is where you link an action. You want to do something you find genuinely enjoyable or look forward to with an action you need to do the habit you're trying to build.
How does that work? Like a reward system?
Sort of, but you do them together. The rule is you only allow yourself to indulge in the want activity while you are performing the need activity.
Okay, so like I only get to listen to my favorite true crime podcast while I'm doing chores or prepping vegetables.
Perfect example. You're using the anticipation of the enjoyable podcast, the high dopamine activity, to make the less appealing chore, the low dopamine activity, feel more attractive in the moment. Shonda Rhimes, the TV producer, apparently used this by only allowing herself to watch her favorite shows while she was on the treadmill. Another related idea is creating a motivation ritual.
What's that?
It's doing something you genuinely enjoy immediately before tackling a habit you find difficult or unpleasant.
So the positive feeling from the enjoyable thing carries over, like listening to upbeat music right before starting a tough workout.
Exactly. It helps bridge the gap and make starting the harder habit feel less daunting. And then there's the power of reframing your mindset.
Changing how you think about the habit.
Yes. You can consciously learn to associate a difficult habit with positive feelings or outcomes just by changing the story you tell yourself about it.
Like shifting from, ugh, I have to go for a run, to, yes, I get to build my endurance and clear my head.
That's the exact shift. It sounds small, but it can be incredibly powerful. Instead of dwelling on the perceived sacrifice or difficulty, I have to wake up early, I have to give up this food I like, you deliberately focus on the long-term benefits and the positive identity it reinforces. I get to become a healthier person. I get to build financial freedom and security.
Like Alan Carr's method for quitting smoking. Not focusing on willpower, but systematically reframing smoking as unattractive and pointless.
Precisely. He helps people see that smoking doesn't actually provide the benefits they think it does, making the craving itself less powerful. It's about changing the attractiveness of the habit at a fundamental level.
So understanding that our current habits, especially the bad ones, are often just like faulty modern solutions to ancient human desires.
That's a great way to put it. Your brain isn't inherently wired to crave scrolling Instagram or playing Candy Crush specifically. It's wired with these fundamental underlying motives that helped our ancestors survive. Conserve energy, find food and water, find love and reproduce, connect with others, gain social approval, reduce uncertainty, achieve status.
And modern technology and products just offer easy ways to get a quick hit related to those motives.
Exactly. Dating apps promise love. Social media promises connection and approval. Search engines promise uncertainty reduction. Video games promise status and achievement. These are just the learned behaviors we've associated with satisfying those deeper ancient desires, often in ways that are ultimately unsatisfying or even harmful in the long run. Understanding this helps you see you're not fighting some innate need for the bad habit itself. You're fighting a learned association. You can find better, healthier habits to satisfy those same underlying motives.
Which brings us logically to the inversion of the second law. Make it unattractive.
Right. To break a bad habit, you need to flip the script and make it seem less appealing. The most direct way is that reframing we just talked about. Consciously, deliberately focus on the negative consequences and downsides of the habit, not just the fleeting immediate reward it might offer.
Really visualize the long-term costs.
Yeah.
Health issues, financial problems, strained relationships.
Yes. Make those negative outcomes feel more real and immediate in your mind. Highlight the benefits of avoiding the bad habit. This can help counteract its short-term allure and make the craving less compelling.
Okay, great. We've covered cue, obvious and visible, and craving, attractive, unattractive. Let's move along the habit loop to the third stage, the response. The third law of behavior change is make it easy.
This law is all about reducing the friction, the effort, the resistance associated with performing your good habits, and conversely, increasing the friction for your bad ones. The core idea is simple. Make it as effortless as possible to do the right thing. And here, James Clear introduces a really important distinction between motion and action.
Ah, yes. Motion feels like progress, but isn't actually getting the result.
That's the key insight. Motion involves things like planning, strategizing, researching, learning, organizing. You feel busy, you feel productive. Reading articles about the best workout routines, buying new running shoes, mapping out potential running routes, that's all motion.
But it's not actually running.
Exactly. Action is performing the habit itself, lacing up your shoes and actually going for the run. Motion is necessary for preparation, absolutely, but it doesn't by itself produce the desired outcome. Action is what delivers the result. And if your preparation phase starts to become a form of procrastination,
You're stuck in motion and need to shift to action.
right, you need to actually do the thing.
Okay.
And the key to making that action feel easier over time is repetition.
Practice makes perfect, or at least practice makes automatic.
That's a better way to put it. This ties into the neuroscientific principle known as Hebb's law. Neurons that fire together wire together. Every single time you repeat an action or even a thought pattern, you physically strengthen the neural connections in your brain associated with that behavior.
Like carving a path in a forest. The more you walk it, the clearer and easier it becomes.
Beautiful analogy. The more you repeat a behavior, the more automatic and less effortful it feels because the underlying brain circuitry is literally becoming more efficient at executing it. This is why, especially when starting a new habit, frequency is often more important than duration. Just doing it consistently, even for a short time, builds that automaticity much faster than doing it for a long time but inconsistently.
Like the London taxi drivers whose brains physically changed from memorizing all those streets.
Exactly. Their hippocampi, the brain region involved in spatial memory, actually grew larger through sheer repetition and practice. Practice leads to fluency, speed, and skill, and it literally reshapes your brain.
And this drive towards automaticity links to another fundamental principle, the law of least effort.
Yes. This is just a core truth about human and really all animal behavior. We are naturally wired to conserve energy. Given multiple options, our behavior will almost always gravitate towards the choice that requires the least amount of work, the least resistance, the most convenience.
Which explains why it's so easy to spend hours scrolling our phones or watching TV.
Absolutely. Those activities require almost zero physical or mental effort compared to, say, exercising vigorously, reading a complex book, learning a new language, or cooking a healthy meal from scratch. These low-effort, highly convenient habits are masters at hijacking our time and attention precisely because they follow the path of least resistance.
So if we want to build good habits, which often require more initial effort, we need to actively fight against this law.
Not necessarily fight against it, but rather leverage it. Think of the effort required for a habit as friction. Good habits often have friction. Bad habits often have very little. Getting fit involves the friction of exercise and maybe changing your diet. Thinking clearly involves the friction of focused concentration. The amount of friction directly impacts how likely you are to do the behavior. So, to make good habits more likely, you must deliberately find ways to reduce the friction associated with them.
Make the good habits the path of least resistance, or at least less resistance.
Exactly. Take a page from Japanese lean production methods in manufacturing. They meticulously analyzed every step of the process and redesigned workspaces to eliminate wasted movement, unnecessary steps, anything that added friction. The result: huge improvements in efficiency and quality. You can apply that same lean thinking to your personal habits.
How do we specifically apply this make it easy law in practice? What are the tactics?
One of the most powerful and immediate things you can do is prime your environment. This means preparing your environment in advance to make the next action, the desired habit, as easy as possible to initiate.
Like laying out your workout clothes the night before.
Classic example. Or prepping your smoothie ingredients and putting them in the blender pitcher in the fridge overnight. Or setting out your book and bookmark on your bedside table. Or following Oswald Knuckles' strategy of resetting the room, tidying up and preparing a space immediately after using it so it's ready and inviting for the next time. That little bit of upfront preparation drastically reduces the activation energy needed to start the habit later.
Removes that first hurdle.
Exactly. And for bad habits, you do the opposite. Increase the friction. Make them harder to do.
Like hiding the TV remote in a drawer.
Mm-hmm.
Or unplugging the game console after each use.
Yes. Store the junk food on a high shelf you need a stool to reach. Delete the delivery apps that make ordering unhealthy food too easy. Even adding just a few extra steps or a few seconds of delay can be enough to disrupt the automatic pattern and give your conscious brain a chance to intervene.
James Clear also talks about mastering decisive moments. What are those?
These are the small choices, often seemingly insignificant, that occur throughout your day but have an outsized impact because they set the trajectory for what happens next. They're like little forks in the road.
Like choosing to put on workout clothes versus pajamas when you get home from work.
Exactly. Or deciding whether to start cooking dinner or just grab your phone to order takeout. Choosing to open your textbook versus turning on the TV. The decision you make in that single, decisive moment often determines the range of options available to your future self and significantly shapes how the next hour or even the rest of your evening unfolds. Learning to recognize and master these key choice points is crucial for keeping your good habits on track.
Okay, let's talk about probably the most famous strategy from the book under this make it easy law, the 2-minute rule.
Ah, yes, the 2-minute rule. It's incredibly simple but remarkably effective. The rule is, when you start a new habit, it should take less than 2 minutes to do.
So you scale down the habit you want to build into a tiny 2-minute version.
Precisely. You take your ultimate goal habit and find the simplest, easiest starting ritual that takes 2 minutes or less. So read 30 minutes before bed every night becomes read 1 page.
Do a 45-minute yoga routine becomes take out my yoga mat.
Run 3 miles becomes put on my running shoes and tie the laces. Study Spanish for an hour becomes open my textbook to the right chapter.
The point isn't that you only do the 2 minutes forever, right?
Not at all. The point is to master the crucial habit of showing up. Anyone can read 1 page. Anyone can take out a yoga mat. Anyone can tie their shoes. It makes starting the behavior ridiculously easy, almost impossible to say no to. And once you've started, once you've overcome that initial inertia, it's often much easier to continue doing more if you feel like it. But even if you only do the 2 minutes, you've still cast a vote for your identity. You've reinforced the habit of starting.
It standardizes the beginning before you worry about optimizing the performance.
Exactly. You can't optimize a habit that never happens. The 2-minute rule helps you ritualize the very beginning of the process, making it frictionless to just slip into the habit. It lowers that activation energy.
And finally, under make it easy, there's the power of automation and technology.
Right. Automation is arguably the ultimate way to make a habit easy because it removes the need for you to even think about it or exert willpower. This is especially useful for habits that don't need to happen every single day or where consistency is critical.
Like setting up automatic transfers to your savings account.
Perfect example. The money moves before you even have a chance to spend it. Setting up automatic bill payments ensures you never miss a due date due to forgetfulness. Installing website blockers or using apps that limit your screen time automatically enforces boundaries without requiring you to constantly fight urges.
These are like one-time decisions that lock in future good behavior.
Exactly. They are incredibly powerful. Buying a high-quality mattress is a one-time action that improves your sleep every night. Getting rid of your TV is a one-time action that eliminates hours of potential distraction. Using commitment devices is another form of automation.
What's a commitment device again?
It's a choice you make in the present that controls your actions in the future. It locks you into a course of action, like prepaying for workout classes makes you more likely to show up, or using software that blocks distracting websites until you've completed a certain amount of work.
Like the story of John H. Patterson and the first cash registers? He used them as commitment devices to stop employee theft.
A classic historical example. The incorruptible cashier, as it was called, made it physically difficult or impossible for employees to pocket cash without it being recorded. Brian Harris's modern habit contract with financial penalties and embarrassing consequences for failing to meet his weight loss goals is another powerful commitment device. These tools automate accountability and make the desired behavior much more likely, or the undesired behavior much harder or costly.
But as we touched on, technology is a double-edged sword. It also makes bad habits incredibly easy.
It absolutely does. Think about autoplay features on streaming services or YouTube they make continuing to watch completely effortless. One-click ordering online makes impulsive purchases dangerously easy. Every time technology successfully reduces the friction associated with a potentially bad habit, it makes it significantly more likely that we'll perform it, often without even thinking.
Which leads us neatly to the inversion of the third law. Make it difficult.
Yes. To break those bad habits, you need to intentionally increase the friction associated with them. Put physical barriers in the way. Log out of accounts. Add extra steps. Use those commitment devices we talked about to make the unwanted behavior more effortful or impossible. Make it hard to do the wrong thing.
Okay, fantastic. We've navigated cue, craving, and response. That brings us to the fourth and final stage of the habit loop, the reward. The fourth law of behavior change is make it satisfying.
This law brings us full circle, right back to Thorndike's cats and the law of effect. Behaviors that are followed by satisfying consequences tend to be repeated. The more immediately satisfying the reward feels, the more strongly the brain reinforces the behavior that led to it.
But here's the challenge we face, right? The mismatch between our brain's wiring and modern life.
Exactly. The fundamental challenge is that we live primarily in what James Clear calls a delayed return environment.
Delayed return, meaning the rewards for our actions often come much later.
Precisely. In the Paleolithic era, where our brains evolved, humans lived mostly in an immediate return environment. You hunted an animal, you ate it almost immediately. You saw a dangerous predator, you ran away immediately. Actions had swift, direct consequences, and our brains became highly attuned to prioritizing immediate rewards and avoiding immediate threats.
But in modern society, most of the really important rewards are delayed.
Think about it. You work hard at your job for weeks or a month before you get a paycheck. You eat healthy salads and go to the gym for months before you see significant changes in your physique or health markers. You save diligently for years, even decades, to afford a house or a comfortable retirement. The payoff is way off in the future.
While the rewards for many bad habits are immediate.
That's their insidious advantage. The sugar rush from eating a cookie is immediate. The nicotine hit from a cigarette is immediate. The burst of novelty or social validation from checking your phone is immediate. These habits provide instant gratification.
So our ancient brain, still partly wired for that immediate return world, naturally struggles to prioritize actions with distant benefits over actions with instant payoffs.
Exactly. It's a fundamental mismatch. So to make good habits stick, especially those with delayed long-term rewards, we need to figure out how to inject some form of immediate satisfaction into the process. We need to make the ending of the habit loop feel good right now.
How do we manufacture that immediate satisfaction for habits where the real benefit is months or years away?
We need to use immediate reinforcement. This could be something as simple as praising yourself or doing a small, enjoyable activity immediately after completing the habit. But even more powerfully, whenever possible, try to make the experience of the habit itself satisfying to the senses. The Stephen Levy hand-washing study in Pakistan is the absolute prime example of this.
But tell us about this study again. It was about getting people to wash their hands more, right?
Yes. Dr. Stephen Luby and his team were working in low-income neighborhoods in Karachi, Pakistan, where infectious diseases like diarrhea and pneumonia were rampant due to poor sanitation and low hand-washing rates. They knew people understood intellectually that hand-washing was important, but the habit just wasn't sticking.
So they gave them free soap.
They did, but crucially, they didn't just give them any old generic soap. They provided Safeguard soap.
And why was Safeguard special?
Well, firstly, it was perceived as a bit of a premium brand, which might have added some appeal. But more importantly, for habit formation, Safeguard soap created a really rich, luxurious foam and had a pleasant, distinctive smell. It made the simple act of washing your hands feel nice. It was a mildly pleasurable sensory experience.
So it wasn't just about getting clean anymore. The process of washing became immediately rewarding in itself.
Exactly. That immediate sensory satisfaction was the key. It transformed hand washing from a chore into something mildly enjoyable, and the results were amazing. Years after the free soap program ended, follow-up studies found that over 95% of the households in the intervention areas still had a dedicated hand washing station with soap and water readily available. The habit had stuck because performing it was satisfying.
Like why toothpaste has mint flavoring or gum has that satisfying texture and taste. It makes the experience better.
Precisely. Those sensory elements don't necessarily make the product function better at its core job, cleaning teeth, freshening breath, but they make the experience of using it more satisfying, which encourages repetition and habit formation.
Another really powerful way to make progress feel satisfying is through habit tracking.
Oh, absolutely. Habit tracking taps into our innate desire to see progress. Making your progress visible provides an immediate form of satisfaction and feedback that can be incredibly motivating. James Clear tells that story of Trent Deersmid, the young stockbroker.
The paper clips guy.
That's him. He needed to make 120 sales calls every day. So each morning, he'd put 120 paper clips in one jar. After each call he made, he would physically move one paper clip over to an empty jar.
So he could literally see his progress accumulating throughout the day. Moving each clip was a small win.
Exactly. Moving that paperclip was a small, immediate, visible reward for completing one more increment of the task. It provided visual proof of his effort, built momentum, and created a satisfying sense of accomplishment. The simple act of marking an X on a calendar for completing your workout, crossing an item off your to-do list, or seeing a streak grow in a habit tracking app, all of these provide a little dopamine hit of immediate satisfaction.
It makes the progress tangible.
And that feeling of progress is ultimately perhaps the most effective form of motivation there is. Seeing that you're moving forward, that your efforts are adding up, is inherently satisfying and makes you want to keep going, often leading to the desire to not break the chain.
But you mentioned a potential pitfall with tracking earlier Goodhart's law.
Right, that's the important caveat. Goodhart's law basically says, when a measure becomes a target, it ceases to be a good measure. The danger with tracking is that you can become so obsessed with the metric itself, hitting the daily step count, maintaining the unbroken streak, getting the number higher, that you lose sight of the actual purpose behind the habit.
You optimize for the number, not the underlying goal or identity.
Precisely. You might sacrifice quality for quantity or find ways to game the system just to keep the number looking good, even if it means you're not actually making real progress towards being healthier or more knowledgeable. Habit tracking is a fantastic tool for feedback and motivation, yes, but remember, it's feedback on your process. It shouldn't become the sole target itself. It's a means, not the end.
Okay, so tracking makes progress satisfying. What about making the absence of a bad habit satisfying, or rather, making performing the bad habit unsatisfying?
That's where you can introduce immediate costs or negative consequences for inaction on a good habit, or for performing a bad one. Using an accountability partner or setting up a formal habit contract can be extremely effective here.
Leveraging social pressure.
Exactly. We care deeply, often more than we realize, about what other people think of us. We don't want to lose face, appear unreliable, or let someone down.
Like that Brian Harris weight loss contract again. He had real stakes money and potentially embarrassing consequences tied to his actions.
Exactly. The potential immediate pain, financial loss, social awkwardness, disappointing his wife and trainer, of not doing the required habits or doing the forbidden ones, was designed to be more immediately salient and unpleasant than the delayed reward of eventually losing weight. Knowing someone else is watching, that there's an immediate price to pay for slipping up, can make violating your commitment feel incredibly unsatisfying.
So this leads directly to the inversion of the fourth law. Make it unsatisfying.
Right. To break a bad habit, you need to make the immediate consequence of doing it painful or unpleasant in some way. Use accountability systems, make public commitments, set up penalties or fines, even if just symbolic, for engaging in the unwanted behavior. This immediate cost helps counteract any immediate pleasure the bad habit might provide, making it less likely you'll repeat it.
Okay, wow. That covers the 4 laws of behavior change derived from the habit loop. Make it obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying for good habits. And the inversions: invisible, unattractive, difficult, unsatisfying for breaking bad ones. That's a really powerful toolkit. But what happens after you've used these laws to establish good habits? How do you go from just having good habits to achieving something truly great, to reaching mastery in an area?
That's the next level, right? Moving beyond just forming the habit to sustaining it, refining it, and continuously improving over the long haul. James Clear discusses several key principles for this good to great transition. One crucial factor is to know your personality.
Understanding your natural tendencies.
Exactly. Your genes play a role. They don't rigidly determine your destiny, but they do predispose you towards certain traits, talents, and inclinations. Understanding these can provide valuable clues about where you might have a natural advantage, or what kinds of activities and habits might feel more inherently engaging or require less friction for you specifically.
So aligning your habits with your personality can make them easier to stick with.
It definitely can. Thinking about general personality frameworks, like the big 5 traits, openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, neuroticism, can be helpful. For instance, someone naturally high in extroversion might thrive in team sports or group fitness classes because they draw energy from social interaction. Someone high in introversion might prefer solo workouts or quiet study habits. Someone high in conscientiousness might find it easier to adopt habits involving meticulous planning and organization.
It's not saying you can't build a habit that goes against your grain.
Not at all. But recognizing that aligning your habits with your natural wiring can make the process feel smoother, more enjoyable, and potentially lead to faster progress and greater satisfaction. It reduces the inherent friction.
This seems connected to the idea of finding a game where the odds are stacked in your favor.
Yes, exactly. Play to your strengths. You are much more likely to persist with, enjoy, and ultimately achieve mastery in areas where you have some kind of natural advantage or inclination, where things come relatively easier to you compared to the average person.
Why is that?
Because when you combine that inherent talent or predisposition with consistent effort, your habits, it leads to competence fairly quickly. Competence often attracts positive feedback, praise, and recognition from others. That external validation feels good, it's satisfying, and it further fuels your motivation to keep practicing and improving. It creates this wonderful, virtuous cycle of effort, skill, reward, and increased motivation.
So don't just pick a habit because someone else is doing it or it sounds impressive. Pick something that might actually be a good fit for you.
Right. But how do you find those areas? This leads to the concept of explore versus exploit.
Explore versus exploit.
Initially, especially when you're younger or starting out in a new field, you need a period of exploration. Trying different activities, dabbling in various skills, experimenting with different types of habits to discover those areas where you might have a knack or a genuine passion. Once you identify those promising areas through exploration, then you shift more towards exploitation, doubling down, focusing your effort, building deep, consistent habits, and working hard to master that specific skill or domain.
Like Google's famous 20% time policy. Explore new ideas, then exploit the good ones.
That's a great analogy for the balance. James Clear suggests maybe dedicating 80–90% of your effort to exploiting your known strengths and refining those core habits, while still reserving 10–20% for continued exploration, trying new things, staying curious. That balance might shift over your lifetime, of course. But the core idea is find your niche through exploration, then dominate it through exploitation and focused habit building. Your genes don't eliminate the need for hard work, they just help clarify where that hard work is likely to be most fruitful and satisfying.
And as you're deep in that exploitation phase, working hard on your habits, there's an optimal level of challenge for staying motivated, right?
Yes, that's the Goldilocks rule. Peak motivation, peak engagement happens when you are working on tasks that are right at the edge of your current abilities, tasks of just manageable difficulty.
Not too easy, not too hard.
Exactly. If a task is too easy, you get bored and tune out. If it's way too difficult, you get frustrated, overwhelmed, and feel demotivated. The sweet spot is where you're stretched, you're challenged, but you still feel like success is possible with effort. Psychologists suggest this zone is often around 4% beyond your current skill level. That's where you're most likely to enter a state of flow, being completely absorbed in the zone, finding the process itself enjoyable.
But even if you find that flow state sometimes, staying consistent long enough for mastery faces a huge enemy, and it's not failure.
It's boredom. This is such a crucial point for mastery. As habits become ingrained, as they become automatic and routine, they inevitably become less novel, less exciting. The daily practice, the consistent grind required for true expertise, can simply become monotonous.
And that's where amateurs and professionals differ.
It's a key distinction James Clear makes. Amateurs are often driven by bursts of motivation, by excitement and novelty. They tend to fall off track when the habit stops feeling fun or interesting. Professionals, on the other hand, adhere to the schedule regardless of their mood. They show up and do the work, perform the habit, even when they don't feel like it, even when it's tedious or boring. They understand that consistency through the mundane is essential. To achieve mastery, you have to somehow learn to fall in love with boredom, or at least tolerate it, to embrace the process of doing the work day in and day out.
That sounds really challenging. And doesn't the very automaticity that makes habits efficient also have a potential downside when it comes to achieving mastery?
It absolutely does. This is a subtle but important point. As a habit becomes more automatic, requiring less conscious thought and attention, you can become less sensitive to feedback. You might slip into mindless repetition.
Just going through the motions.
Exactly. You stop paying close attention to small errors or imperfections. You stop actively thinking about how you could do it better. You just execute the habit the same way you always have because it's efficient. And this mindless automaticity can actually lead to a plateau in your skill level or even a slight decline in performance over time, even after you've achieved a certain level of competence. Because you're no longer engaged in deliberate practice. You're just reinforcing the current level of the habit, not actively pushing to refine and improve it.
So how do you counteract that potential decline or plateau that comes from habits becoming too automatic?
The antidote is combining your automated habits with regular, deliberate reflection and review. Habits get you consistently showing up and doing the work. Reflection and review ensure you're learning from that work and continuing to get better. Mastery requires systems for careful self-assessment and improvement, not just systems for efficient execution.
Like Pat Riley's system with the Lakers, the career best effort thing.
That's a perfect example of a system designed for reflection and continuous improvement within a team setting. The CBE program didn't just track standard basketball stats like points and rebounds. They also meticulously tracked and valued what Riley called unsung hero deeds. Things like diving for loose balls, helping a teammate up off the floor, making the smart extra pass, taking a charge.
Things that reflect effort and teamwork, not just scoring.
Precisely. The focus was relentlessly on achieving a 1% improvement in effort and fundamental execution every single day. It kept the players anchored not just on the outcome goal, winning, but on the system of playing hard, disciplined, team-oriented basketball. It reinforced their identity as dedicated, hardworking professionals. By regularly reviewing these specific behaviors, they ensured they were consistently doing the fundamental things right and then striving to do them right every time. This systematic reflection helped them avoid complacency, sustain their effort, and continue improving year after year, leading to multiple championships.
It's like the Chris Rock example too, right? Constantly testing jokes in small clubs.
Exactly. He's not just telling jokes automatically. He's performing action, but then he's intensely observing the audience feedback, reflection, taking meticulous notes on what landed and what didn't review, and then refining the material based on that feedback loop. It's deliberate practice fueled by reflection.
James Clear mentions his own personal reflection process too. An annual review and an integrity report.
Yes. The annual review is looking back at the past year, what went well, what didn't, what lessons were learned. Pretty standard reflection. The integrity report, which he does mid-year, is more focused specifically on his core values. Am I living in alignment with the values I claim to hold? Where am I falling short? It's a deliberate check-in to ensure his daily habits and overall systems are still congruent with the type of person he aspires to be.
It prevents that gradual drift away from your principles.
Exactly. These dedicated periods for reflection and review, even if it's just a few hours scattered throughout the year, are crucial. They help prevent that slow, unnoticed slide that can happen when habits become too automatic. They force you to revisit your desired identity, assess your current trajectory, and decide if you need to upgrade your habits, refine your systems, or maybe just refocus on mastering the fundamentals. You need systems for review and critique just as much as you need systems for execution if you want to avoid plateau plateaus and keep growing.
Wow, okay. That was an incredibly thorough exploration of atomic habits. You've covered so much valuable ground. Let's try to distill it all down now and summarize the absolute key takeaways and practical tips for everyone listening.
Sounds good. I think the absolute core message, the big idea, is both simple and profound. Small habits, these tiny atomic habits, when practiced consistently and allowed to compound over time, are the pathway to remarkable, sometimes even seemingly unbelievable results.
And crucially, don't get overly fixated on just setting big goals. Instead, focus your energy on building and relentlessly refining better systems, the collection of habits that will reliably move you in the right direction day after day.
Exactly. And always remember that your habits are actively shaping your identity. Every action is a vote. So make sure your habits are casting votes for the type of person you genuinely aspire to become. Let that desired identity guide your choices.
And the practical framework for actually changing your behavior boils down to understanding and strategically applying the 4 laws of behavior change derived from that cue craving response reward habit loop, and remembering their inversions too.
Right. So to build a good habit, you need to make the 4 stages work for you. 1, make the cue obvious. 2, make the craving attractive. 3, make the response easy. 4, make the reward satisfying.
And conversely, to break a bad habit, you need to disrupt the loop by making the stages work against it. 1, make the cue invisible. 2, make the craving unattractive. 3, make the response difficult. 4, make the reward unsatisfying.
And we discussed a ton of practical steps based on these laws. For instance, start by simply increasing your awareness. Use that habits scorecard technique to just notice your current habits and their cues without judgment.
Then, to kickstart new habits, make specific plans using implementation intentions, I will behavior at time and location. And leverage existing routines with habit stacking. After current habit, I will new habit.
Definitely shape your environment. Be the architect. Make the cues for your good habits impossible to miss, visible and obvious. And simultaneously, make the cues for your bad habits invisible or hard to encounter. Prime your environment ahead of time to make the next desired action easier.
To make good habits feel attractive, try temptation bundling, carrying something you want to do with something you need to do. Surround yourself with people where your desired behavior is the norm, join supportive groups or communities. And consciously reframe your mindset, focus on the benefits, shift from have to get to.
To make habits easy, ruthlessly reduce the friction involved. Identify and master those small but decisive moments that set your daily trajectory. Use the brilliant 2-minute rule, standardize before you optimize, to make starting ridiculously easy. And look for opportunities to automate good habits or use commitment devices to make them almost inevitable.
And finally, to make habits satisfying so they stick, find ways to add immediate rewards or reinforcement right after completing them. Track your progress visually using apps, calendars, paper clips, whatever works, because seeing progress is inherently motivating. And consider getting an accountability partner or creating a habit contract to introduce immediate positive or negative consequences.
And naturally, apply the inversions for bad habits. Increase friction, make cues invisible, reframe the habit as unattractive by focusing on downsides, and make the immediate consequence of doing it unsatisfying or painful through accountability or penalties.
Plus, those advanced ideas for going from good to great. Try to align your habits with your natural personality and strengths. Find the games where you have an advantage. Operate within the Goldilocks zone of just manageable difficulty to stay motivated. Understand that pushing through boredom is essential for professionals. And critically, build systems for regular reflection and review to keep improving and avoid the automaticity trap. And maybe the most important meta habit, consistency over perfection. You will slip up occasionally. Everyone does. The absolute key is to not let one missed day turn into 2 or 3 or a complete falling off. Missing once is an accident. Missing twice can be the start of a new, unwanted habit. Forgive yourself the slip-up and just get back on track with the very next opportunity. That resilience is crucial. Absolutely. This whole deep dive into atomic habits really illuminates just how powerful and broadly applicable these principles are. You can use them in almost any area of your life where your behavior plays a role.
It truly provides a practical, evidence-based framework for understanding why you do what you do, and more importantly, how you can intentionally design your habits to build the kind of life you actually want to live.
So, as a final thought for you to maybe chew on after listening to all this, perhaps take a moment to consider just how much of your typical daily behavior is truly a conscious, deliberate choice versus how much is an automatic habit running on autopilot, below the level of your awareness. And then maybe ponder how taking just a little bit more intentional control over even those tiny, seemingly insignificant automatic choices, those atomic habits could fundamentally reshape the entire trajectory of your future.
Or perhaps consider the slightly counterintuitive idea we touched on. Could learning to fall in love with boredom, embracing the necessary consistency even when it's not exciting, actually be the unexpected superpower that unlocks your ability to achieve your biggest, most meaningful long-term goals? Something to think about.